We'd like to present our next speaker, Tony Hsieh, who in 1999, at the age of 24, sold Link Exchange, the company he co-founded, to Microsoft for $265 million. He then joined Zappos as an advisor and investor and eventually became CEO, where he helped Zappos grow from almost no sales to over $1 billion in gross merchandise sales annually, while simultaneously making Fortune magazine's annual list of best companies to work for. In November 2009, Zappos was acquired by Amazon.com in a deal valued at $1.2 billion on the day of closing. His first book, Delivering Happiness, A Path to Profits, Passion, and Purpose, will be published on June 7th. Please note that Tony Hsieh's speech will actually now be taking the form of an interview with Chris Sacca. So please welcome Tony Hsieh and Chris Sacca.
Yeah, I learned about this new format about 3 minutes before you did, actually. So Tony and I have been friends for a long time, actually, and quite intimate friends. But 90% of our friendship really isn't appropriate for a public setting, I figure. And so this wasn't an exercise in like what to ask, it was an exercise in what not to ask. But we're at this conference. It's about Zen, it's about awareness, it's about philosophical questions. And so I want to start right off and ask you, Tony, if a tree falls in the forest, does it? No, seriously. You're the CEO of Zappos, a company that I deeply admire. I think from afar, most of our interaction with that company is, you know, it's almost religious experience for those of us who buy stuff there, because the customer service goes to a level unparalleled at any other company in the world. It's paramount. And then as I got to know the company, I realized like that actually is not an accident. That's a core part of the strategy, and it goes through all everything the employees do, et cetera. And so I'd love to just kind of understand, what was the path to being CEO of Zappos? You know, I know you're involved in other companies before. You'd already made a bunch of money even. How did you become CEO of Zappos? Why did you become CEO of Zappos?
Yeah, so I guess I've been entrepreneurial all my life. I've run mail order businesses and pizza businesses and was doing the lemonade stand thing when I was a kid. And in 1996, a college roommate and I, we were in college, but in college I ran a pizza business with him together. And then after graduating from college, went to work for Oracle and found that you know, the corporate environment wasn't right for me. So we and started a company called Link Exchange, which this was in 1996 during that first .com boom. And we grew that to about 100 or so people and then ended up selling the company to Microsoft in 1998. But what a lot of people don't know is actually the reason why we ended up selling the company. It's because the company culture just went completely downhill. I remember when it was just 5 or 10 of us, and it was a lot of fun. It was kind of like your typical .com. We were working around the clock, sleeping under our desks. No idea what it was. But we didn't know any better to pay attention to company culture. And so we ended up hiring people that had all the right skill sets and experiences, but they weren't necessarily culture fits. And by the time we were at 100 people, I myself dreaded getting out of bed in the morning and going to the office. And that was kind of a weird feeling, because this was a company that I co-founded, and if I myself didn't feel like going to the office, I wondered how all the other employees felt. So after selling the company, I quit shortly thereafter, and Alfred, who's our CFO and COO today, who you know as well, we formed an investment fund and invested in about 20 or so different internet companies, and Zappos just happened to be one of them. But over the course of a year, I realized that investing for me was pretty boring. Wait, you're an investor now, right? So pretty boring for me, but good for certain other people. And so I really miss being hands-on and actually part of building something. So Zappos at the time was the most interesting and most fun of all the companies we were involved with. So I ended up joining full-time within a year. This was 99 to 2000, and I've been with Zappos ever since.
So you take the helm of this company, and you hadn't really done retail since the pizza business type stuff, but you're shipping shoes. And you've got actual investors. This is a company, it's backed by investors like Sequoia, famous VCs who want to see returns on their investment, that kind of stuff. And yet for you, one of the most primary motivations for doing this is to build a company culture that eclipses the stuff that made you miserable at Link Exchange. And so, as I've visited Zappos, I've been interacting with their culture for a while. It's entirely unique. And so one of the things you guys do is you hire different than any other company I've ever seen in the world. So talk a little bit about that hiring, that practice, and how you actually relate that to anything tangible in terms of results in the company.
Yes, so we actually do 2 sets of interviews for everyone that's hired. It doesn't matter what position, you can be an accountant or lawyer or software developer. And so the first set is kind of the standard. The hiring manager and his or her team will interview for technical ability, relevant experience, fit within the team. But then our HR department does a separate set of interviews purely for culture fit, and they have to pass both in order to be hired. So we've actually passed on a lot of really smart, talented people that we know can make an immediate impact on our top or bottom line, but if they're not a culture fit, then we won't hire them. And so the way we've formalized the definition of our culture is we have 10 core values, and we actually have interview questions for each and every one of those core values. And we actually didn't always have the core values. We didn't roll out our core values till maybe 4 or 5 years into it. And it was something that most of us, myself included, kind of resisted because it seemed like one of those big corporate things to do. And a lot of companies they might call them core values or guiding principles or so on. But the problem is usually they're very lofty sounding and they read kind of like a press release that the PR department put out, and maybe you learn about it on day 1 of orientation, but then it just becomes this meaningless plaque on the wall. And so we wanted to come up with a set of core values that we could actually commit to, and by committing meaning that we hire and fire, we're willing to hire and fire people based on whether they're living up to those core values regardless of their job performance. And our performance reviews are 50% based on whether they're living or inspiring the core values and others. So coming up with the list of core values was actually a pretty tough thing when you think of it in that framework. And it took us a year. I basically sent an email to the entire company and said, what should our core values be? Got a whole bunch of responses back, and we went back and forth for a year and finally came up with our list of 10. So probably the core value that trips us up the most in the hiring or interview process is core value number 10, which is be humble. And because there's a lot of really smart, talented people out there that are also really egotistical. And so at most companies, probably what would happen would be, if you interviewed someone like that, they'd see, this person might be annoying and rub you the wrong way a lot of times, but he can add a lot of value, so therefore we should hire that person. Whereas at Zappos, it's not even a question, we just won't hire them. And a lot of it comes from not just what happens in the office, but we're located in Las Vegas, and next time any of you are in Las Vegas, we actually give tours to the public Monday through Thursdays. And if you go to tours.zappos.com, you can just sign up right there. So we'll pick you up in a Zappos shuttle and give you a tour and then drop you off at your hotel or wherever you want to go in Las Vegas. And so we do the same thing for candidates, and a lot of them we end up relocating. But what they don't realize is actually the interview kind of begins when they get picked up by the shuttle driver, and then afterwards, the recruiting team will go back and ask the shuttle driver, how were you treated, when the candidate thought he was off the clock.
Yeah.
And so for each, and I'll give you an example of some of our interview questions. one of our questions is, well, one of our core values is about being creative, adventurous, and open-minded. And one of our interview questions is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how lucky are you in life? 1 is, I don't know why bad things always seem to happen to me. 10 is, I don't know why good things always seem to happen to me. Well,
what's the right answer?
Well,
don't worry, we'll keep it, we won't tell anyone.
The right answer is 8.63. And so, no, but, well, we don't want to hire the ones because they're bad luck, and we don't want to bring bad luck to Zappos. But this was actually inspired by a research project I had read about several years ago that actually asked that same question, and to a random group of people, so they got answers all over the board, and some ones, some 10s, and a bunch in between. But then afterwards, they had them do a task. And the task was to go through a newspaper and count the number of photos that were in that newspaper, and then tell the researcher the answer afterwards. Well, what they didn't know was that it was actually a fake newspaper, and sprinkled throughout the newspaper were these headlines that would say things like, if you're reading this headline now, you can stop the answer's 37 plus, collect an extra $100. And what they found was that the people that consider themselves unlucky in life generally never noticed the headlines. They just went through the task at hand and, eventually came up with the right answer. And the people that consider themselves lucky in life generally stopped early, made an extra $100. So the takeaway isn't so much that people are inherently lucky or unlucky, but more that luck is about being open to opportunity beyond just how the task or situation presents itself. So that's why we asked that question.
So you also asked another question, which blew me away when I first heard it, and it's fun too because when I've gotten close to your company, I always hear this from executives and not necessarily just folks throughout the culture. But one of the executives, the head of HR, told me one of your key questions is you ask people how weird they are.
Yep.
And so they scale themselves on 1 to 10 on how weird they are. What do you learn from that?
Well, if you're 1, you're probably a little bit too straight-laced for the Zappos culture. If you're 10, too psychotic maybe for us. But one of our core values is create fun in a little weirdness. And our belief is that everyone's a little weird, and really it's just a fun way of saying that we really recognize and celebrate each person's individuality. And we want their true personalities to shine in the workplace, whether it's with coworkers or with the way you interact with customers on the phone. So if you're a customer and you call us, we run our call center very differently from most call centers. We don't have scripts. We don't measure how long they've been on the phone.
There's no quota of calls or anything like that. I've seen your call center, it blows my mind.
Yeah, most call centers have this concept of average handle time, which is about basically how quickly can you get the customer off the phone, because it's all about maximizing for the call center efficiency, whereas we really view the telephone as one of the best branding devices out there, because we have the customer's undivided attention for 5 or 10 minutes, and on average, and if we get the interaction right, then they remember that for a very long time and tell their friends and family about it. So we've actually had phone calls lasting as long as 6 hours. I'm not sure how the bathroom situation worked out for that one, but yeah, we'll stay on the phone as long as possible, and customers call for, most calls actually don't result in sales, but we're not trying to maximize every transaction. We're trying to build a lifelong relationship with our customers. So customers might call because they need to, it's their first time going through the return process and they're not sure exactly how to do that, or they just wanted advice for a wedding they might go to this weekend. And I think we have some customers call just because they're lonely, and we'll talk to them.
Tell us a very touching story about you empower your customer service representatives. I mean, first of all, you put your phone number on every single page of your website. So every other website you go to on the internet hides the phone number, right? So you really, you're walking the walk. You put it on every single page.
No, we're actually thinking of changing it to your cell phone number. And then you won't be as lonely.
I am kind of lonely. I appreciate that. Thanks for looking out. No, so a very touching story I heard about the extent to which a customer service representative once went to take care of a woman who was grieving. Do you remember the story I'm talking about?
Yeah, well...
I haven't heard you tell this in like 3 or 4 years, so.
Yeah, probably, well, we actually have a number of similar things, but I think the one you're talking about was probably the one that somehow wound up on a blog and then ended up on the consumerist website, so that's how that happened. But a woman, so we do this thing which is not advertised, but if you order a pair of shoes from us and let's say it's not the wrong size, if you call us to ask for an exchange, we'll actually send you out the replacement pair before we get the original one back, and just trust, the customer will do the right thing. And we just say, try to send it back within 2 weeks, and we won't charge you anything in addition. And so a woman had done that, and 14 days had passed, and she still hadn't returned the shoes. So one of our reps called up and just to remind them that we're still waiting and wanted to know if she needed help with anything. And it turned out that her mom had just passed away during those 2 weeks, and so obviously it just slipped her mind. And so the rep took it upon herself to send the woman flowers, and just to show our condolences as a company. And we don't have a process or procedure for that, but we also don't have, most companies you need supervisor approval or to do really anything, whereas we empower all of our reps to just do whatever they feel is right, and we trust their judgment. So when the woman received them, she was so touched that a company would actually care, and so at the funeral a couple days later, she told the 50 friends and family that were there. And so now, not only is that woman a customer for life, but all her friends and family are as well. And so it's that type of thing where, our goal is to create personal, emotional connections with each and every customer, one interaction at a time. And we get thousands and thousands of phone calls and emails every day. And so that's just one story. But the great thing in the way we think of building our brand is really just create these stories, one phone call at a time, one email at a time, thousands and thousands of times every single day.
Yeah, so you guys have actually been a big influence on our culture at Twitter. I think you first came and visited the company when we were about 15 or 16 people and really started coaching us. And it's always weird when you're taking advice from people who are kind of your peers and stuff, but you'd learn so much. And I think, Evan Williams gets a lot of credit for realizing from day one that culture really is the driving force of these things. And if the first 50 people you hire are going to set the path for the rest of the people you hire, and if you don't get that right, and if you don't get the right attitude towards your customers dialed in right away, it's going to be tough. So your weirdness in the Twitter culture became best expressed by Biz, the co-founder, who said that we hire for humor. And for us, Biz put it that we hire for humor because humor is a delivery vehicle for the truth. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes things funny. And that's why Fox News doesn't have a daily show. But what's amazing is that beyond kind of the fuzziness of this stuff and the touchy-feely, like, happiness type stuff, like, you and your counterpart, Alfred, who's a really good friend of mine, is the COO and CFO and kind of responsible for making the trains run on time, both illustrated that this is actually really good business, and that even as a diehard capitalist, treating customers this way is good business. So one of the illustrations I remember from the first time you showed it to me was the return policy. So basically, you guys cover free shipping both ways. Anyone can return stuff. But how can you afford something like that and still make money in a business?
Yeah, a lot of the things that, people ask us that about, for example, the call center stuff we were just talking about, or we run our warehouse 24/7, even though that's not actually the most efficient way to run a warehouse. The most efficient way is to let the orders pile up so the picker doesn't have to walk as far. And then things like the free shipping both ways, or we do surprise upgrades to overnight shipping for most of our loyal repeat customers. And all of that added up is very expensive. But our whole philosophy is, let's take most of the money that we would have spent on paid advertising or paid marketing, and instead invest it into the customer experience, invest it into our culture, and then let the customers do the marketing for us through word of mouth. And so we grew from no sales in 1999 to we're now doing over $1 billion in gross merchandise sales every year. And the number one driver of that growth has been through repeat customers and word of mouth. On any given day, about 75% of our orders are from repeat customers.
So can you quantify people who return stuff? Do they come back and buy more next time?
Yeah, and so we've actually studied the return rates because sometimes when Sequoia was an investor, they would ask, what can you do to get the return rate down? And we said that's actually not our goal. What we want actually, it's less about getting the return rate down, and it's more about actually getting customers to stop thinking of returns as a bad thing. But the shipping back and forth is the service. And so kind of like Netflix, where that's what you do. It's just the back and forth shipping. And so when we've studied the different classes of customers in terms of their return rate, we actually found that the customers that return more often percentage-wise are actually our best customers. They end up spending more dollars total on a net basis per year than the customers that don't return as often.
So being good is good business.
Being good is great business.
Nice. All right, so we're not going to plug from stage, but hypothetically speaking, if you had a new book coming out on June 7th, available in bookstores everywhere and on Amazon.com and things like that, and it were called Delivering Happiness, well, first, what should people in this room do if they want to get a copy of this book, actually? Hypothetical. This is a legend book.
Well, hypothetically, if we were to try to do something commercial here, they would go to bookstores to buy it on June 7th. But because we're not trying to do something commercial here, we've actually arranged for everyone here to get a free advance copy.
So wait, so they get a free copy on June 7th?
But no, there's more. If they act within the next 30 minutes, then no, we actually have a bunch of advance copies that is normally reserved for the media outside. So after we're done talking, you guys can all take
Cool. Right on. All right, so you gave me this book when, not this particular one, but a copy of this book when we were down at the TED conference. And the TED conference, you already stay up late, and you're stuck talking with people. And I think I got back to my room around 1:30 in the morning, and I'd probably had a couple drinks in me. And I open this thing up, and I read it, and I get to bed finally around 5:30 in the morning.
The more you drink, the better.
I mean, it was a legitimately good read, and I spoke to Jen, who helped you write it and co-edit, and just kind of push the process along and stuff like that. And I was just blown away by the book. But one of the questions I have is, so assuming everyone here is going to read this book, you and I both come from this electronic world. We're tweeting, we blog. You've got some amazing blog posts. You wrote one that I want to talk about in a second that really touched a lot of us on Twitter. But you had to kind of commit this to Dead Trees a while ago. So you had to send in a manuscript months ago, and it's kind of been locked in ink for a while. What have you learned in the process of talking to people about this book? Has anything in here changed, or are you realizing now you left anything out?
No, nothing. I mean, nothing in there has really changed, but I guess what I have realized, so basically we finished working on it, and the way, the book's a combination of, it's probably, I don't know, maybe 3/4 stuff that I wrote, and then there's 10 or 12 contributions from third parties, mostly Zappos employees. So Jen helped look through all the different contributions we had, and then edit them and put it together into the book. And so we finished it last year, and then just over the past, I guess it's been 4 or 5 months now. It's more about, oh yeah, there was that other story that we forgot to tell, or this would have been really good to include in. And so what we're actually doing is we have a website for the book, deliveringhappinessbook.com, where the plan is, as we hear these additional stories, not just old stories, but the really cool thing is the book is about really that you can combine happiness with it used to be that maybe 50 years ago, you had to choose between profits and happiness, whether of employees or customers. And the book is really about there's another way, actually, where you can make employees happy, make customers happy, and make investors happy. And so what's been really cool is some people that have read the advanced copy of the book have emailed me and told me that because of that, they've gone and changed their culture at their company or focused more on customer service at their company. But not only have they done that, but then they come back a couple months later and say, now sales are increasing and growing faster than before, profits are going faster than before, and everyone's just happier. So those types of stories we want to put on the website, especially after the book is officially out. Just because a common reaction we get a lot of times is, okay, Zappos, you're an internet company, you guys have special rules, all .coms are kind of weird and so on. And but then I get stories like the Atlanta refrigeration company where they're based in Atlanta and they have people out in the field doing refrigerator repairs. So almost you can't think of a more different company than Zappos, and yet they've been able to implement some of the things that are in the book, and it's just really exciting to hear stories like that. And ultimately, the book is about trying to start a movement where it's not just about my happiness or the happiness of Zappos employees or customers, but really just spreading this idea of happiness as a guiding principle for how to run companies and still make money to other companies.
Oh, how did you end up on happiness? Why isn't it clarity or quality or peace or something like that? How did it become happiness?
I think originally it was just a couple years ago, I personally just got interested in reading articles and books about this field called positive psychology, about the science of happiness. And originally it was just a hobby, but then realized that it's actually what we were doing at Zappos. We were trying to make customers happy, we're trying to make employees happy, and we apply that same philosophy to vendors as well. So basically, the vision of Zappos changed from about focusing on customer service to, after that it was, let's focus on culture as our #1 priority, and then the customer service will be a natural byproduct of that. And then now it's really just about happiness, and that's the, and hence the title
coincidentally,
of the book.
the title of the
Right.
book that may or may not be coming out on June 7th,
Right.
bookstores everywhere. And by the way, I'm going to take a couple questions from the audience in a minute, but you wrote a blog post that, a lot of people don't read blogs anymore now. The tweets are out there, or they use tweets to filter blog posts, but you wrote one that I think was one of the most meaningful blog posts I'd read for me. Maybe it's 2 years ago now, but it was, I'm going to paraphrase the title. It was basically why Twittering makes me a better and happier person. And do you still require all your employees to be on Twitter?
We don't require them, but we teach Twitter as part of the new hire orientation that everyone goes through. And then it's up to them whether they want to use it or not.
But tell us about that blog post. Because it really deeply resonated with me. And as I explained to people why Twitter meant something to me and the energy I got from it, I found myself pointing to your blog post a lot.
So I guess in a way, it started out with we're just thinking about, okay, when I tweet something out, like it has to be so my Twitter username is Zappos, and so whenever I tweet something out, it needs to be something that is representative of the Zappos brand, and so it's kind of evolved a little bit since the blog post, but basically I try to send out at least one tweet a day, and the goal of each of the tweets I send out is to fall into one of 4 categories, which I use the acronym ICEE, and basically the goal is for each tweet to either inspire, connect, educate, or entertain. And ideally, some of the tweets will do more than just one of those things. And so, when I guess we approach Twitter very differently from most companies that are on Twitter. We don't think of it as a marketing channel. We think of it as a relationship building channel. And it's a great way for employees to connect with each other. And in terms of how customers or whoever is following me on Twitter, the goal is more just to, over time, form a picture of who I am and who we are at Zappos. And so a lot of people that aren't on Twitter don't really see the value of Twitter, because they ask, well, what can, in 140 characters, how meaningful can you be? And the way I kind of think about it is, any one tweet isn't going to be that meaningful, but if you think of tweets as, say, dots on a piece of paper, putting enough dots there over time, it'll eventually form a picture or an outline of who you are.
It's amazing, yeah. So your cat tweets follow the same principles?
My cat is, it's weird. It sometimes tweets, but it tends to be more darker than Zappos.
Did we just move you on the weird scale from like a 5 to a 6 or like a 5 to an 8?
My cat. But,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we talked earlier in our earlier panel a lot about productivity. How do we handle all this information flow, et cetera? I mean, you have taken a very unique approach to Twitter in that you follow back most of the people who follow you. So you're following tens of thousands of people, and you've made it possible for all of them to connect to you directly. And you also very publicly give away your email address, and so you're like intensely reachable by folks. How do you manage all that?
Well, for Twitter, actually, it's changed a little bit, because originally the reason why I followed everyone back was because if I didn't follow them back, then they had no way of direct messaging me. But through the folks at Twitter, they actually set my account to a special status, so anyone can direct message me now without me following them back. So I actually don't follow everyone that follows me back, but what I do is anyone that mentions Zappos in their tweet, I basically every day, several times a day, will do a Twitter search for Zappos, and I'll read every single one of those. So anyone that wants to get a hold of me can either mention Zappos or direct message me.
And you got how many followers right now?
I don't know. Well, you have the laptop.
1.6 million, huh?
But it's not I don't know. I guess that's not really a real number, because a lot of that was from when Twitter had the whole suggested follower or users thing. But in terms of emails, yeah, if you call our call center or ask anyone, everyone's instructed to give out my email address. And so the way I've managed that, because it's definitely hard to scale, is I will read every single email, but I won't necessarily personally respond to every email, but we make sure someone does respond. And so we actually have a small team that we call the CEO team, so that if someone emails me, then if it's a question that's been asked before, because 90% of the emails are similar questions, then, and a great example is we get interview requests all the time, and so we just ask them, email us the questions, whether it's from media. A lot of them are college students taking a business class or something, and so we want to make sure we answer all of them. So the way we've scaled that is when they email in the questions, the CO team will go through and see if that question's been asked before. And if it's been asked before, we have a database of the answers I've given in the past, and then they copy and paste that, so it's still my words, and it's not someone pretending to be me. And they reply with, part of the CO team, and here are below are Tony's responses to your questions. And then when there's a question that hasn't been asked before, then they'll forward it to me, and I'll personally type a response, and then that gets added to the database. So slowly over time, it's just building up a database of answers that I've actually answered.
Cool. So you have this very unique culture inside. Everyone sits in cubicles. You sit in a cubicle. There are no private offices. Every team, as you go on the Zappos tour, every single team has a theme. As you walk by their cubes, they will perform for you. Not kidding. the IT manager puts on a sombrero and a poncho and plays a guitar. I mean, there's one team of people who scream they need more cowbell, and they start doing a whole performance for you. It's a very unique culture, but one of the things that blew my mind is, tell me about, as we think about productivity, as we think about how not to steal people's attention, et cetera, tell me about emails in which somebody replies all.
Yeah, so I think this is a problem at every company probably, where someone replies to all. And one way to address that is just don't allow people to email company-wide mailing lists, and we didn't want to do that. So what we've done instead is, if someone accidentally replies to all, we have this thing called a reply to all hat, which is like kind of a dunce hat. And then we'll actually, there's this big ceremony where we actually have 10 or 15 people, whoever happens to be around, grab the dunce cap and then go over and force the person to lead a parade, a reply to all parade. And then we actually capture all that on camera, and then we post it on our blogs. So people only make that mistake once.
Do you guys sell the reply all hats? Because I think you've got probably a lot of buyers here.
We actually do, and they sold out. And so we're actually reordering them. I don't know if they're replenished. You can search Zappos for reply to all.
So we're out of time, but I do have one more question, because you talked about being a movement. And this is something that the first couple times I heard you say it, it kind of went one ear and out the other. And it's something we've really tried to take to heart in Twitter and a lot of the other companies I work with. But you have a book called Tribal Leadership. It's not your book, but you have a book called Tribal Leadership that you basically send to all of your friends. I might have 2 copies from you. But
that's because we're very close friends.
Yeah. But so this book, though, just talk about the basic hierarchy of why we work and how we work, because that was really deep once I finally got my hands on that book.
In terms of how...
Well, why do people work?
You mean the 5 levels that they described? So interestingly enough, the author of Tribal Leadership is actually going to be here in half an hour, because we're downstairs. We're doing this live stream thing from, I think, 7 to 8 p.m. tonight.
You do a virtual happy hour to celebrate delivering happiness. Every Friday, wherever you are in the world, you stream out a happy hour over the internet, and thousands of people join, and they toast you over the internet, and you talk.
Yep. And then we have different guests, and so Dave Logan, who's one of the authors of Tribal Leadership, is one of our guests today. And so he describes people and organizations as having 5, classify themselves in one of 5 levels. And level 1, kind of the language they use is life just sucks in general for everyone. And you kind of see that type of culture and thinking in, say, prison populations or inner city, for example. And then level 2, they class the language represented there is my life sucks, but there's recognition that there are other people's lives out there that do not suck. And then level 3, which is what you find in most of corporate America, the language you hear is I'm great, but because you're not. And so there's a lot of, behavior-wise, those types of people are the ones that really think of information as power and don't like to share and try to build a lot of, they're kind of like your typical networker. They try to build a lot of one-on-one relationships, whether it's with the people they work with or anyone that might help them out in business. So if, for example, if this were all a cocktail party, I was level 3 person, then I would go out and basically try to exchange business cards with everyone and hoping that I'll meet someone who can benefit me and maybe I can pay back somehow, and so it'll be a relationship. But then the level 4 leaders and companies and cultures, the language there is we're great. And so there's this concept of we're in this together. And the behavior that you see at, whether it's organizationally or at, say this were a cocktail party, would be if I meet you and then I meet you and find out that you two have something in common or can help each other out, what I would do is introduce you to each other and then move on to the next person. And so they actually describe the level 3 behaviors really they create a lot of, they call it dyads, one-on-one relationships, whereas the level 4 behavior, they create triads. And so it's a 3-person relationship. And so the goal, and the other interesting thing about triads is the role of each person in a 3-person relationship is to make sure that the relationship between the other 2 people is strong. That's the third person's responsibility. And then that applies to each person. And so kind of the example that they like to give is when 2 parents are fighting, you know, the little kid comes along and says, "Mommy, Daddy, stop fighting." And so the kid is just instinctually playing his role in a triadic relationship. So there's actually a lot of things where we're actually implementing a lot of that stuff at Zappos in terms of trying to see how we can create more triadic relationships cross-departmentally, cross-levelly, and just in general within the company. And then level 5, the language is life's great. And so for level 4, it's, from the company's perspective, it's we as a company are great and we're going to crush the competition. Whereas for level 5, the example they give is Amgen, whenever they studied Amgen, if you asked them at the time, who's your competition? The answer was not, you know, this other biotech company. The answer is, oh, our competition is cancer, for example. And so level 5 is really about trying to, it's not about us versus them. It's about kind of this higher purpose thing. And what the research has shown, you know, both from tribal leadership and Good to Great is another book that we have our employees read. What they found is that what separated the great companies from the good ones in terms of long-term financial performance were 2 things. One was having very strong cultures. And what they found is that it actually doesn't matter what the culture is. What matters is that they have strong cultures, that they have core values, and they commit to them. So that was one thing. And the other thing was that they found that the great companies all had a higher vision or purpose beyond just money or profits or being number 1 in a market. And so it's kind of ironic where it's, if money is not your primary motivation, in the long run, you actually end up making more money. And I guess the way I kind of think of an analogy was kind of like when we were in middle school or high school, and like chasing after a girl. Like if you're too nice to her, then going directly after the girl, then you won't get the girl. Whereas if you're...
Is that what I messed up?
But if you know,
Poetry,
actually...
the chocolates, the fuck.
But the guy who actually ends up attracting all the girls in, you know, middle school or high school is the one who actually, you know, at least gave the image of not caring, not being as into the girl, and then that somehow attracts all the girls. So...
Well, I mean, Zappos, it took me a while to kind of get my head around it, but Zappos really is a mission. It's a mission-driven company, and the people who work there feel like they're part of a movement, that they're changing the envelope of customer service. And I think, you know, I can't understate the impact you guys have had on me, on Twitter, on the way we think of, you know, I think you directly influenced our mission statement of be a force for good. And so it's always been a pleasure to know you and work with you. And thanks for coming here, and thanks for sharing with everyone.